Wonderful. So I want to welcome all of you to this webinar, bringing a racial equity lens into our work with communities. I'm Valeriano Ramos, and this webinar is part of our online learning series through which Everyday Democracy and its anchor partners exchange knowledge and improve their dialogue to change practices and toolkits. We really appreciate you joining us today, especially given the difficult challenges we're facing with the coronavirus epidemic. So thank you all for joining us today. I want to start by introducing my esteemed colleague and co-facilitator for this webinar, Ms. Gwen Whiting, who is the Director of Training and Leadership Development at Everyday Democracy. Welcome, Gwen.
Thank you, Val. And I need to come up with a word for esteem.
Distinguished would be fine.
Colleague Val Ramos. And I'm really happy to be with you all. And Val is the Director of Strategic Alliance, and he's also our Equity Officer here at Everyday Democracy. And so always looking for opportunities to work with Val. And Val, I see our Executive Director, Martha McCoy, is on here as well.
Yeah. Welcome, Martha. How are you?
Thank you. It's great to be with you all.
Hey, Martha.
We have a great turnout. Very good.
It's fabulous. Well, so happy.
So before we proceed, I want to share with you some housekeeping and technical information about the webinar. So this webinar is being recorded, of course. Please mute yourself unless you're speaking to reduce background noise. Your audio-video controls are on the lower left corner of your screen. You can minimize or move your video boxes at any time by going to the top section of your screen. Please hold your questions until the end of the brief presentation segments, but make sure you jot them down so as not to forget them. You can also write them in the chat room located at the bottom of the screen. And of course, during the discussion sessions, we encourage you to participate and make sure that before you make comments or participate, that you check the audio box at the bottom to enable your audio, okay? Any questions? All right. So at this time, I would like for each of you to introduce yourself very briefly, stating your name and organization, and for about a minute or so, share with everyone how you're feeling and how your communities are coping with the coronavirus pandemic and the crisis we're all facing. So anyone who wants to start, please make sure you are brief, because we don't want to devote, more than 15 minutes to this part of the webinar. Anyone can start.
I'll start. This is Martha McCoy, and I just want to say hello to everyone and send my greetings and say how great it is to be with you all, and how excited we are to find ways to work with you in this challenging time, and to see how it shines a light on a lot of the challenges we are already knowing we're all facing and how we can support each other. So it's wonderful to be with you all.
Thank you, Martha. And folks, yeah, go ahead.
My name is Laura Rosenkrantz. I'm the Director of Human Resources at Community Partners of South Florida.
Great.
It's been a challenge to get our workforce remote, but I think we've been really successful. And we're just hoping everyone can stay safe and healthy.
Wonderful. Thank you, Laura.
Jamie, also from Community Partners. Thanks, Laura. I think the biggest thing is for an agency our size as well. So 250 staff, building housing folks, doing behavioral health, as well as operating community centers has been very challenging to continue to provide families with the resources that they've come to expect from us and need, especially more during this time, has been challenging. And so if there's any peer sharing at the end, I'd love some more ideas and resources about how we can connect. We're using a lot of technology, Facebook Live, Zoom, a lot of different things, but open to the conversation.
Thank you, Jamie. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Casey Stushak. I'm with the West Virginia Community Development Hub, and we're a statewide community development nonprofit. And it's been an adjustment. Luckily, we're close with our funders, and so we've been working remotely for a couple of weeks now. And so the community work is more difficult because most of our meetings are now remote, and they're still not meeting with each other, kind of thing. So, but I think we're focusing mostly on how do our funding program, how do our programs adjust based on the coronavirus COVID-19 kind of crisis? What adjustments can we make to be responsive to our communities? And then how can we use our communications arm that's statewide to be sharing resources and things like that as well.
Thank you, Casey, and welcome.
Hi, this is Andrea Jacobs from Interfaith Works in Syracuse at the Center. Hi, at the Center for Dialogue, and I would say that the Center for Dialogue, all the dialogues are obviously suspended, so we have a time to sort of refocus and do a lot of the background work that we never get done. But our organization's a bit larger than us, and they are struggling with the same thing that everybody's already named.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Crystal Jones. I'm with Project Ujima in Akron, Ohio. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Crystal.
Hi, Val. So basically, we do a lot of work with the schools and with organizations that are, of course, quarantined or in. The one real challenge for us is that we do centering circles for pregnant and new moms to address the high infant mortality rate of Black babies. And so we've been trying to figure out how we still have our centering circles and address the needs of moms who might be going through some unusual challenges at this particular time. So we had a great meeting yesterday, and we're going to have Zoom circles. So we'll see how those go.
Great. Thank you, Crystal, and welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Barbara Cheeve. I'm in West Palm Beach. We're in two hats on this call. One affiliated with my friend Jamie there at Community Partners, our anchor partner here. And I also sit as a senior associate with Everyday Democracy. So I'm working on dialogues with our criminal justice system, which unfortunately was supposed to start this week. So they obviously came to a screeching halt. But we're keeping everybody engaged and working as hard as we can so that we hopefully we'll kick them off in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Barbara. It's great to have you here. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Corey Campbell. I'm the intake specialist here with Community Partners Housing Division. At this point in time, we're now trying to figure out how we do our webinars or Zoom accounts with our financial fitness so that we can come up with different topics that's beneficial for the clients at this time. Currently trying to purchase a house may not be as important as trying to remain in the unit that you're in right now. So we're coming up with different ideas and partnering with different organizations so that we can assist with our clients with that part.
Thank you, Corey. Thanks. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Ashley Weaver. I'm with the Indianapolis Neighborhood Resource Center. We are an organization that is very focused on asset-based community development, which entails a lot of face-to-face conversations, engagement, trainings, facilitation. So we are in the process of figuring out what do we look like after this, trying to come up with programming and dialogue that would be beneficial to the communities we serve. We're seeing gaps in systems right now is very apparent. So how do we lead the conversations to help change that?
Thank you so much, Ashley. Welcome.
Hi, this is Beth Broadway.
Carrie, go ahead.
Go ahead, Carrie.
I'm muted. Hi, I'm Carrie O'Neill. I work for SDSU Extension here in South Dakota. I'm in southwestern South Dakota. I'm used to being remote, so remote working is nice actually, but I share all of your concerns about really leading robust discussions online is tough.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome, Carrie. Welcome to the webinar. Good to see you.
Hi, this is Beth Broadway from Syracuse, New York. I'm cameraless at the moment. Somebody else is using it, so I'll get on camera when I can. We are an agency that does the Dialogue Center, as Andrea just told you, but we also do essential services to frail elders and to refugees. So we have about 3/4 of our staff working remotely, and another third of us, a quarter of us or so, are still here in the office and have been all this week. We did send people home last week. Certainly the financial concerns, our funders going to continue to provide funding for the programs that we've been running. Are we going to be able to keep paying our staff while they work remotely? Or are we going to have to do furloughs? You know, all those things are of great concern. I think that our staff has done a great job in doing the outreach that they have needed to do to the most frail and at-risk people that we serve. And they're using the phone system all the time. That's how we're being in touch with people. We are still seeing people, and the big crisis now for people is unemployment. You know, we're seeing a lot of refugees coming and they don't understand about the unemployment system. And now they need help figuring out how to apply for unemployment benefits because they've been laid off.
It's great to have you here, Beth. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I would say, oh, I'm sorry, just one other thing, I'm sorry, I'm sure many of your communities are doing this too. Our medical community is putting together a ventilator use plan and what to do if we run out of ventilators. So we've been able to, I've been asked to serve on that policy committee and then to identify faith leaders who can help be a part of those conversations so that we can limit unconscious bias around who gets a ventilator and who does not.
I have a quick comment on that really fast. I just heard about some research that folks were implementing on using up to 9 patients on one ventilator. If you guys had read about that or not.
Yeah.
Thank you so much both for contributing that.
Hi, I'm Lynette Flage. I work with NDSU Extension in Fargo, North Dakota. Our challenges here have been, I work with the family and communities area, and our biggest challenge, again, I guess, as Carrie mentioned earlier, is just connecting with our rural communities, especially via video or teleconference, however that might work, and certainly our tribal partners that we have out there. We've got a number of tribes and reservations in North Dakota, and we just want to make sure that we're still connecting with them to provide the educational opportunities and just in this tough time, how we continue to do that.
It's great to have you here, Lynette. Thanks for joining us. Thank you.
My name is Carlin Thompson. I'm an AmeriCorps Vista member serving at Community Partners in South Florida in Palm Beach County. I guess I'm just using this time to be able to share my tech savviness with all of my coworkers. So.
Wonderful. Welcome. Okay, anyone else? We have 32 people here. Isn't that incredible?
Hi, I'm Sherry Middlebrook. I'm the Executive Assistant to the CEO at Community Partners. You've heard all of our challenges from everybody else, and I'm just here to learn.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you so much.
My name is Mike Stout. I'm at Oklahoma State University in Tulsa and co-director of our new Center for Public Life at OSU Tulsa. Just like everybody else, we've been experiencing the challenge of trying to shift our programming online. We've also been asked by the Tulsa Health Department to help lead dialogue and action planning around some of the non-immediate crisis needs in terms of mental health services, substance abuse, counseling, those kinds of things, anticipating a surge in those needs as the economic part of the crisis gets worse and all the other things that are going on. And one of the things, I've also got some other projects going on that I'm working with community organizations to bring perspectives and voices of folks with lived experiences in the communities that they work with into the program development process. And we are having a hard time finding equitable ways for people to be able to participate in those conversations. So the topic of today's session is actually very relevant. So.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mike, for joining us. And Oklahoma State Tulsa is our newest anchor partner, so we're delighted to have you here with us.
And
Good
just
afternoon,
frame a little bit about why we have so many on the call. Number one, I think just like everybody else, we're trying to keep people busy so we can have them do some professional development while they're working from home. But then also a lot of the people you see are either AmeriCorps Vista members or they serve on our CP equity team. So we have formed an equity team through our other national partner, which is NeighborWorks America, and they create a race, equity, diversity, and inclusion team. So we have 5 of our folks internally, and we're just continuing. Actually, Carlin and another peer led us to have our agency equity vision that we just finalized earlier this week. And so we are responsible, or the representatives on behalf of all 250 staff and 10,000 clients per year, to really be focusing on this. So just sorry, we have a lot of people, but
that's great, Jamie. It's great, and I really look forward to them participating in the discussion. So thanks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Reggie. I work at Interfaith Works in Syracuse, New York. I'm a colleague of Andrea Jacobs, who introduced herself earlier. And again, we're just doing some behind the scenes, just revamping our programs, as well as trying to stay engaged with our community. So thankful for the opportunity to join you today.
Thank you, Reggie. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Tammy Moore. I'm also in Tulsa at OSU Tulsa working with Mike Stout. And I see that a couple of other members of our team are on the call. So I'll let them describe the things that we're doing, because I know that they will do a good job of that. The thing I wanted to say is, and in fact, this just occurred to me as I was getting ready for this call, that I work this way all the time because like my colleagues in Extension, my physical location is distant from where the rest of my faculty colleagues are and the students in our program. So I'm very used to being on Zoom calls and interacting in this way, and it feels really natural to have 32 people in my office. So welcome to Tulsa. But what I realized is that often my social interaction was when I would schedule meetings in Tulsa, and they're always in coffee shops. And so while the way of working feels very familiar, I'm starting to feel a little like it's hard for me to work that way, because I was realizing this morning, I'm finally starting to feel kind of shut off from stuff, which is weird. So I guess I wanted to say that just in a way. I don't know if anybody else has spoken to that, but that's something that has popped up for me today. So Val, you and Martha and the team at Everyday Democracy, thank you very much for pulling this together, because it's very, it's a great stand-in for coffee. Shades of brown is where we would be if we were.
It's really great to have you here, Emily. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is Lakeisha, and with Project Ujima, and I echo everything that Crystal has already stated. Just wanted to also share that in this time of social distancing, we're trying to keep in the forefront of our minds how to social distance but not disconnect, and realizing that we do have programs that were beneficial, especially our mothers in the school systems. And so how do we continue to put together like a digital engagement strategy so that we aren't disconnecting with the people who need us most? So hi there, we are plugging away at this thing, and we're looking forward to figuring out how we can make sure that we keep them engaged and also include everyone at the table.
Thank you so much, Lakesh. Thanks. Anyone else?
I'm Vanessa, and I am with Project Ujima as well, echoing what Crystal and Lakesh have already stated.
Welcome, Vanessa.
Hello everyone, my name is Kofi Adai, and I'm also from Interfaith Works at Syracuse, New York, and I'm one of the dialogue coordinators here with Interfaith. I also echo with everything that my colleagues, Andrea, Reggie, and Beth already said. I think we are in the process of just adjusting our project to all the uncertainties that we are facing nowadays. And I think my particular focus right now is, how do we keep the youth that we are serving them involved and engaged, even though we are distant away from them? How do we still keep them going and making sure that we are checking in with them and they're doing good, health-wise and mental health and everything else.
Thank you, Kofi. Thank you so much. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Patrick Graysham at OSU Tulsa. I don't have much more to add on what we're doing than what Mike and Tammy have talked about, but this whole moving kind of digitally and still engaging has got me thinking about kind of the equity of people who don't have the access to technology and how we can try to still engage them despite being socially distant.
Thank you so much, Patrick. That's a very important point. And we will have at the end of the webinar a conversation with Bruce Mallory, who is one of our anchor partners, and he will be inviting folks to think about maybe planning some kind of a confab next month to address issues related to coronavirus, access, and equity. So thank you, Patrick, for contributing that. Anyone else?
Good afternoon. My name is Dewana Dismuke, and I am a Vista leader, AmeriCorps Vista leader serving at Community Partners of South Florida, and I support a team of 8 Vista members that are serving throughout Palm Beach County. I was invited by my supervisor, Jamie Lee Brown, to listen in, and I am just excited to be here to listen in, especially during this time, and participate in social distancing and being able to communicate with 32 other people is awesome.
Thank you and welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Annie Eiffel. I'm the project director for Healthier Glades, as well as being part of Community Partners of South Florida. Right now, the community I serve, I'm in Palm Beach County, but I'm also serving a community that's very rural. And so some of the things that I'm seeing that may be a little different from the rest of Palm Beach County is the amount of communication that's being shared in regards to the impact of the coronavirus as it pertains to testing. What are our needs out here? We have one hospital that serves almost 4 communities within that area, and that hospital is not big enough to accommodate should we get a large outbreak. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about. And a lot of it too is I'm not sure in terms of state of Florida how serious we're taking it, because right now, if you look across the state of Florida, you have the I-4 corridor that splits the state in half. So anything south of I-4 is very densely populated. That's where a lot of your tourist attractions are taking place. Orlando, Tampa, Miami, West Palm. And so we just had spring break. So right now the testing is not where we should have it, and it'll be interesting to see what happens, because I was just looking at the Florida Department of Health, and we done jumped from 1,977 confirmed cases to 2,300 in less than a day. So as we start having this conversation, my only concern is with a county as large as Palm Beach, making sure that all the residents in this county are represented and supported.
Thank you, Annie. Thanks for joining us, for sharing that. Anyone else?
I'll jump in. This is Michelle Holt-Shannon with New Hampshire Listens. Pronouns are she, her, hers, and Bruce Mallory's on the call too. I think that's it for us for New Hampshire Listens. Definitely echo a lot of the things people are talking about. I immediately tried to learn a lot about Zoom and about hosting things online, and so just have had a steep growing curve, but trying to do some of that work, helping other people think about how they can hold space online since we're not doing that in person. I'm definitely because with different youth groups like high school and college students, the feedback that I'm getting are young people definitely wanting to connect, but a lot of sadness, like, you know, a lot of disappointment, a lot of, you know, definitely deeply feeling the disconnection. And so again, trying to, you know, find ways to help bring folks together again online and by phone in ways that can help. I think that one of the things that I'm trying to pay attention to is helping people join by phone, even when people are on video, and we making sure people don't feel like they are being paid less attention to because they're not on camera, and that with a lot of young people, they're not wanting to join on camera for a million reasons. So that's a little bit of what we're doing. The other thing I think for me is just readjusting to what is productivity supposed to look like. I think all these things I've said on a couple of the groups that I've been on with Gwen and others is just that, like, cut those meetings in half. You know, what used to last an hour is half an hour, and what I used to be able to schedule face-to-face throughout a day is less if it's all on screen. It's just a different kind of tiring, even though I think we can accomplish things we didn't think we could maybe, but it's also like, what's that look like for me? I definitely have a screen ceiling that I reach. So
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for joining us.
Let me just share one other thing. We have roundtables that we're doing, and you know, one is just helping people think about hosting, but the other one is to have people start thinking about how to re-enter public spaces in ways that don't amplify bias after people have been scared and by themselves, and, you know, the bias that's there anyway. So those are coming up if folks are interested. Would love thoughts on that too.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle. And we still have maybe a few people. Can you please try to be brief if you can, because we want to get started also with the...
I'll offer Michelle briefly and just say a shout out to you and thank you to Val and Gilo for helping to organize this, and to Martha for being behind it all. With Bruce Mallory with New Hampshire Listens, he, his, him. Michelle mentioned the roundtables that we're sponsoring right now. We had 90+ people on a call yesterday. We're learning a lot about ways to create a sense of connection, even if it's across, even if it's virtual. I guess the overall challenge that I'm personally grappling with now is how to be proactive and reactive at the same time. Conditions and information are changing constantly, so there's a kind of reactive necessity, and there's a need for being proactive to help people feel engaged and connected. And that's terribly important in terms of mental health and a sense of agency in all of this.
Bruce, thank you so much. And at the end of the webinar, I invite you to engage with folks about the idea that you offered. And Beth Broadway also suggested the same thing, of maybe planning some kind of a confab or town hall meeting, virtual town hall meeting with the anchors to talk specifically about issues related to racial inequities in access to healthcare for people in communities of color. So it would be great to have that, and I invite you at the end of the webinar to engage people to explore that possibility. So thank you.
We'll keep that quite brief, just to plant a few seeds and then follow up later.
Excellent. Thank you, Bruce. Anyone else? Okay. I think, first of all, I want to thank all of you for sharing. This is great to be able to have so many of you here. I think, I'm not sure if West Virginia Center for Civic Life is on the call or on the conference call, but I think we have all the other anchors here. So it's great to have you. And at this point, I want to pass it on to Gwen, my colleague, who's going to talk about the learning goals for this webinar.
I'm a board member of this West Virginia Center for
Civic Life. Oh, you are? Great, great. Casey?
Yes, thanks.
Welcome. Great to have you here. Okay, Gwen?
So thanks, Val. And I know that took a bit of time, but you know, when crises come, you really do need to pause. And we actually just had a dialogue by doing that. So we will be adaptable in terms of adjusting our schedule. But we do have some learning goals here, and they're on the screen. I'll just quickly read them, that we hope to learn from each other about race and racism and how it impacts our communities. We're hoping to learn about racial equity and what a racial equity lens looks like in our work. We want to share challenges and best practices on embedding racial equity principles and practices in our work with communities. We want to share concrete tools and activities to help us incorporate a racial equity lens into our work. And listening to some of you just in terms of adapting the work that you're doing right now, all of these fit with right there and within what you're actually doing in the moment of crisis, but also in your ongoing work as well. So is there anything that you think is missing from this list? Are we okay with this list of goals? Speak now. Or hold your peace for at least the next 30 minutes. Okay.
All right. So thank you, Gwen. And these learning goals all relate, of course, to our learning about racial equity. But before we talk about racial equity and the racial equity lens, it's important that we explore what race is and also what is racism. So Gwen will now engage you in a discussion, a very short discussion on those topics. Gwen?
Yep. And this is not an uncommon word for you. What is race? The question is, why is it so important to understand? So can we hear from a couple of you about what that word race means to you, and to add to that, why is it so important to understand? So a couple of people who would like to volunteer. Want to make this as interactive as possible. I'll call some names. I used to be a school teacher.
Barbara?
Yeah.
How did I know you'd find me?
I was watching you.
Well, I'll start with race, a social construct developed, and what I always like to say about that is because we made it up, we could unmake it, but we're not going to. So while race is not real, it is completely real in the world we live in.
Okay. Thank you, Barbara. And Barbara does a lot of work around that whole word and the variations of it. One other person? And I know there's some chats going on in the chat box. We'll check that periodically, but we also, people are actually adding things that they're doing in the chat box. So we want to make sure you're looking at that as well. One other person would like to do another variation on the word race? If not.
Gilo?
Yes.
I could say something edgy, and race is something that a lot of white folks think that other people have. Put that out there.
Right.
And what do you think about it, Bruce?
I think what Barbara said a minute ago got it just right. Race is not real, but we talk about it as if it's real, and it has real impact. The construct of race has real impact on our society. So we live in this paradox that we struggle with all the time.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
We'll have a chance to explore, how it operates. Specifically, we're going to talk about historically, but the different forms that it operates, but also the actual impact that it has. So thank you for contributing that.
Yes. So we were going to show a clip that talks about exploring what race is not. And Val, you still want to go with that?
Yeah, I think because most of you have seen this video clip, I'm pretty sure, but there may be some folks who haven't. And I encourage you, it would be good if we could show it. It's a 5-minute clip, and then just ask people for some impressions or comments on it.
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. I already have it up. Can everybody see California Newsreel?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Great. Okay. Here we go.
There is no question that individual human beings are different, one from the other. Our eyes confirm this day in and day out. Skin color, body shape, hair form, eye shape. For several hundred years, we have used these visual differences to classify people into 4 or 5 groups we call races.
We have a notion of race as being divisions among people that are deep, that are essential, that are somehow biological or even genetic, and that are unchanging, that these are clear-cut, distinct categories of people.
And the beauty of the race business is that you can identify people by just looking at them. You don't even have to look at their genes because one manifestation of their genes is there, namely skin color or eye shape or hair shape. And then that's the key to everything.
The idea of race assumes that simple external differences, rooted in biology, are linked to other, more complex internal differences, like athletic ability, musical aptitude, intelligence. This belief is based on the idea that race is biologically real.
All of our genetics now is telling us that that's not the case. We can't find any genetic markers that are in everybody of a particular race and in nobody of some other race. We can't find any genetic markers that define race.
And actually, what we're going to generate are billions of copies of a little section of your genetic code. And we're going to look
These students are gathering for a DNA workshop led by Cold Spring Harbor Labs teacher Scott Bronson.
Type it up, 30 microliters.
Marcus, Gorgeous, Jackie, Noah, Hannah, Jamil, and their fellow students are about to explore the biology of human variation.
But there's another type of DNA. Does anybody know what that type of DNA is? Yeah. Mitochondrial DNA. Very good.
They will compare their skin colors.
They're like not human colors.
They will type their blood. And they will swab cells from inside their mouths to extract a small portion of their own DNA. Once the sample is ready, they will compare some of their genetic similarities and differences.
We're going to look at a very tiny section of this ring.
The students begin the workshop with the same assumptions most of us have.
As you begin to look at the data, you might want to keep in your mind who you think you might be most similar to and who you think you might be most different to.
I think I probably have the most similarities with Mr. Bronson or with Carol because we were white males, both Carol and I and both Scott Bronson and I.
I think I'd have the most differences with Carol and the most similarities with Gorgeous. She's African American, I'm African American. I mean, like, black.
I think maybe me and Natalia are most alike. She's Latin American and I'm Latin American. I figured that there would be tons of differences, especially with people who looked so different.
To understand why the idea of race is a biological myth requires a major paradigm shift, an absolute paradigm shift, a shift in perspective. And for me, it's like seeing, what it must have been like to understand that the world isn't flat. And perhaps I can invite you to a mountaintop and you can look out the window and at the horizon and see, oh, what I thought was flat, I can see a curve in now, that the world is much more complicated. In fact, that race is not based on biology, but race is rather an idea that we ascribe to biology.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So I know a lot of you may have seen this video. I think it's a very short but very very challenging video for some people. Really, this disrupts the entire concept of race as biological, when in fact, as we know, and as Barbara and Bruce said, it's a social construct. And it is rooted on power and privilege, obviously, and used by some people to classify others, create a hierarchy, and justify differential treatment. And it is a fluid construct, as we will learn about a little bit more later, that is achieved through racialization. The definition of racial categories and how they have changed over time is important to also understand about race as a construct. And any comments or questions about the video?
All men are created equal. All men.
Anyone, any comments on the video or questions?
It's Barbara. The only thing I would add that I've never seen that. It's actually quite good. It doesn't talk at all. I'm surprised it doesn't about the Human Genome Project. It says that we are 99.99% alike.
Right.
And to tack on to something that Bruce said, and I think that's so perfect, Bruce, that a race is something that white people think other people have and experience when race was created by white people.
Right.
You know, so we have to, yeah, I mean, that's huge to know. And that it was created by white people and why it was created by white people when it was created. So I think we have to, you know, as we say, we can undo it, it'll probably never be undone. I'm sure it'll never be undone, but we have to go back to why it was created.
Right, right. And we'll get a chance to talk a little bit about that later. So, Gwen, you want to move on with the next discussion?
Yes, and I'm not seeing you all, but I have another set, so I hope that I'm on track. For some reason, my screen went down. But yeah, since we're talking about race and we said we talk about the impact, the fact that it's a social construct and what that really means. And Barbara, that video is just a clip from a series which may get into the genome piece that you're talking about as well.
Right.
Yeah, but the next discussion that we want to have is around the word racism. And that has a negative connotation. And so let's talk about what that is and how does it operate in our society. So again, to be interactive, we'd like to hear from a couple of you all. What does this word racism mean to you and how does it operate in our society? And you can talk about, you know, in the work, the personal work that you're doing as well. So from a couple of people, and I'll try to get my screen back up as well. Anyone want to respond to that?
Well, I would say that it is a system that's hierarchical, that uses socially constructed categories of people that are based on physical appearance in order to justify the unequal distribution and allocation of resources and opportunities in the society.
Mm-hmm.
That's my sociology textbook definition.
That was great.
Not a bad one at all. Anyone else have a different take on it? Or something to add to that?
I feel like it's prejudice and antagonism.
I like that. Can you say more about that? That word antagonism, that's another buzzword.
Well, you know, when I think about things that come out of people's mouths, that you immediately think, oh my goodness, that was racist. It's also very antagonistic in the sense that it stirs very strong feelings one way or another in people who hear it, people who experience it. Mm-hmm. It's and the types of comments people can make and actions that they can take are very antagonistic in the sense that they're to make someone feel bad or to stir someone else to action.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And emotions come into play with that word antagonistic, and that stirs to action as well. Yeah, thank you for that.
Hi, this is Crystal again. So Project Ujima is doing a series of circles on the book White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. I'm sure many of you have heard of that book. Yes. And so we explored the in the circles, we have explored the question of prejudice, or the definitions of prejudice and racism, of course. And so DiAngelo, and I agree with this definition, she defines prejudice as prejudgment about another person based on their the social group to which that person belongs. And then she defines racism as a racial group's collective prejudice backed by the power of legal authority and institutional control. So then we talk about racism being institutional or systemic racism, and prejudice being those individual acts. So a lot of times people say I'm not racist when we look at that as an individual act, then of course, then she talks about the binary, non-binary sort of not racist, racist kind of thing. And so I think of it, racism, as more of a system, if you will, systemic racism, the power of a dominant group, the white dominant group, to control all the authorities so that basically they continue to have control.
Mm-hmm. Well said, Crystal.
Really wonderful. Yes.
Yeah. So we do have a definition of racism. If we go to the next slide, I don't know who said it, but this is a textbook definition, very much aligned with, next slide, Sandy, with what you were saying.
And of course, I'm glad that people brought up that distinction between, the personal bias and prejudice, and also the systemic and institutional, because we'll talk a little bit more about that in the coming slides. But this is a great definition, I think, but I want people to read it, and any comments, we want to hear any comments that you may have on it. I hope everyone can read it. It's kind of small.
Please read it aloud for those on the phone.
Okay.
Can't see.
Yeah, Gwen, you want to do it? I have difficulty with reading myself. So.
Sure. Racism, and it's defined as a noun, which has impact there. A noun, a belief or doctrine that inherit differences among the various human racial groups, determine cultural or individual achievements, usually involving the idea that one's own race is superior and has the right to dominate others, or that a particular racial group is inferior to the others. Then number 2, a policy, system of government, etc., based upon or fostering such a doctrine, discrimination, hatred, or intolerance of another race or other races.
Mm-hmm.
Which is very much in line with the textbook definition we got from one of you.
Right, exactly. And so obviously this captures, I think, both elements, right? The individual, but also the institutional and systemic. So Sandy, the next slide. So we can see that racism operates at 3 interconnected levels. First of all, the individual level, as we've been talking about, manifests itself in personal bigotry, prejudice, implicit bias, and also microaggressions. Some of these terms may be new to you, so I encourage you to check online or do some reading on those terms, especially microaggressions and implicit bias. But those operate at a very personal, interpersonal level. There's also racism manifests itself institutionally. At that level, it shows itself in terms of discriminatory treatment, unfair policies, and biased practices based on race that result in actual inequitable outcomes between white people and people of color. And that's important. There's impact related to institutional racism beyond the individual level, which also has impact, emotional and other. But institutionally, it impacts every aspect of life of people. In the larger sense, it operates as a system, as Crystal mentioned. It manifests in societal, cultural, and ideological beliefs, practices, hierarchies, and also the imposition of white dominant ideas and rules that in most cases, reinforce racist policies and practices. Next slide. And so also it's important to understand the historical aspects of racism. In the United States, racism has had a long and complex history, and it has taken many forms, starting first of all, of course, with slavery. Slavery created a socioeconomic system of enslavement of human beings, oppression and denial of their human rights and of opportunities. It also led whites to accumulating wealth and reinforced a system of white supremacy, a system of practices and beliefs of white supremacy. And it later evolved into legalized Jim Crow segregation in the South and many forms of discrimination in the rest of the country. In terms of the impact, it led to resistance against slavery and Jim Crow by African Americans that culminated in the civil rights movement and continue to engage not only our nation, but others in that anti-racism movement work that we're all doing. So in terms of the so-called encounter with Native Indigenous people, as most of us know, it led to pandemics. A lot of Native people died as a result of smallpox and other illnesses that Europeans brought from Europe. It also brought about violation of treaty agreements, genocide, and the uprooting of indigenous cultures and beliefs. And it also forced the relocation of thousands of Native people from their native homelands into reservations. The other form of racism is, of course, colonialism. Most people don't associate that with racism, but racism operates throughout the colonial framework or structure. Colonialism reinforces white supremacy and the superiority of Anglo-Saxon ideas, beliefs, and practices. It also has led to the occupation and seizure of land and property in various countries in Latin America, for example, the colonization of the islands of Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, and others outside the region. And also it has led to numerous military and political interventions that have disrupted the lives of people in Latin America and other countries. So many of these people have lost sovereignty. They have been denied fundamental rights of citizenship and independence. It has created economic dependence and exploitation. And also there have been acts of political oppression against resistance movements by those oppressed. So as you can see, each of these historical forms of racism have had their own distinct dynamics and consequences, but they're all connected to a larger context of white supremacy and privilege. Racism has impacted African Americans, Latinx, Native Indigenous peoples, and Asian Pacific Islanders in distinct, but at the same time, very similar ways. Gwen?
Good information, Val. After hearing all of that, I know that there have been some personal experiences that have popped in your head about how people of color in your communities have been impacted by racism. Could we hear a couple of short stories around that from a couple of people? We believe the stories are the most powerful, those personal experiences that people are willing to share.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one or two persons can share a story of how it has impacted people of color in your community.
I guess I'll just share what's been happening more recently because of the coronavirus.
Yes.
Is if there is an Asian restaurant or a business owner, then they're either being harassed or less frequented because of racism.
Yeah. And that's really unfortunate. You know, there's a lot of ignorance that in terms of understanding other cultures. And then when you have people who you do listen to who promote that as well. And so that's really been a powerful, unfortunate situation. Yes.
In Indianapolis, we've seen definitely recently how zip codes are real strong determinants of health and social health in our community, and that we're seeing communities that are predominantly communities of color have 7 to 10 years lowered life expectancy. And I just feel like, you know, the structural systems of racism have really played into that. Mm-hmm. In addition, I'm from a little city called Gary, Indiana, where, you know, racism and white flight really turned Gary from a booming hub of well-connected, middle-class working families to, statistics that have been very, very depressing in the last few years. So I think racism really permeates everything in our culture. It happened way before any of us, and it continues to influence the way that we interact, the way that we serve, the way that people are served, resources, opportunities. It's everywhere.
Yes, very unfortunate.
This is Beth Broadway. In Syracuse, we've seen differential treatment of people both in the city by the police based on skin color and neighborhoods and their ability to communicate. And we've also seen that particularly for Black people traveling in the suburban areas, they get stopped much more frequently than white people do, asked where they're going, saying basically you're not in the neighborhood you belong in. And that can be anybody, including people who actually live in those neighborhoods. So we see that kind of systemic racism operating. I think we also see racism directed at people because they don't speak English well. We've seen racism directed at people because they are visibly Muslim, wearing hijab, or being treated and being told you shouldn't be in our country, things of that nature.
Yes.
I'll stay in Syracuse for a minute and just talk about even in schools, specifically around how kids learn, what worksheets are used, specifically like in the school district where my kids go, there's a slave song being taught in music class because the teacher didn't know that was the original, the origin of this song. And then there's the Confederate flag being worn on Halloween. There's crosswords, that have implications between the words that teachers are not catching, and the stories are always told from the victor's point of view rather than the victim. So the whole story of history is not being told. And it's all, under the guise of, well, we don't know better. These are the resources that we have, without being proactive at what we're teaching our kids and why. And I think that is a form of racism, especially when it's brought to the attention of those in charge, and they say, well, it's not that important to change.
Right.
In Akron, it's interesting that we all know it, but sometimes when it's in writing or in a report, rather than individual instances, it makes people sit up and take notice. So within the last couple of years, there was a report generated called Elevate Akron, and it was a collaboration of community leaders, the City of Akron, the Chamber of Commerce, and others. And one of the key findings of the report, and I'll just quote it, says, much of Akron, particularly its Black population, is excluded from economic opportunity. And no surprise, but again, as it is in writing, it causes everyone to sit up and take notice. And I think for us, it's the prime opportunity for us to continue to really gather around and focus on the conversation as to why and what needs to be done.
Yes. Thank you all for sharing. I do want to be mindful of time. You see that even in this setting, powerful stories, powerful conversation that we can have. And we hope those of you who did call in on the phone that we shared equally the information that other people were seeing. But we wanted to keep this to an hour. So Val, I'm going to recommend that we plan another one of these.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Number one. But number two, if we could let Bruce close out, and that we had a lot more. It's better to have more slides and not need them than to not have enough.
That's right. That's
we
right.
will share the rest of the information with you all at another time. Bruce, I want to bring you in because I know what you have to share is equally as important.
Well, again, as I said earlier, this will be very brief. And honestly, I apparently, Beth, you and I had similar thoughts at the same time. when I saw the notice for today's conversation, and given the focus on race, I wrote back to Val and suggested that we might frame this around the ways in which race and racism are showing up now in the current COVID-19 crisis. And Val suggested that that would be an appropriate topic for a future, either virtual confab or town hall meeting. Val mentioned maybe for the anchor partners. I might suggest that we go broader than that. There are many organizations across the country. Right at 2 o'clock right now, at least Eastern time, eDemocracy has just launched a big webinar on preserving democracy in the time of the COVID-19 crisis. So what I'm going to continue to suggest to Val and Gilo is this notion of a follow-up that really connects the health crisis with the structural systemic racism we have in our society. And as I was listening to the conversation, the framing that I wrote down to offer up is that the combination of systemic racism, which we've been talking about just now, and individual bias, which you all have referenced specific incidences in your communities that show up that way. Those two things together, systemic racism and individual bias, equal or create inequities in our healthcare system that harm people and communities of color and other disenfranchised groups in ways that we really need to call attention to and explicitly work hard to resist and reject and substitute different power relations, different kinds of ways of attending to the disproportionate effects of the coronavirus crisis on, again, communities and people, both communities and individuals of color. And what our responsibility is as people who work in the public sector and the civic engagement and dialogue and deliberation fields, as many of you shared in the beginning of this conversation, the work you're doing right now. So it's that intersection that I think would deserve a good hour or 90-minute sharing, and both pushing information out, but also giving people a chance to share what their strategies have been to address this moment of heightened individual bias, and in which our structural racist system is hard at work preserving existing power relationships. I'll stop.
Right. And thank you, Bruce. And I know that Beth might also want to add something, and I think also Crystal, because the work you're doing, Crystal, in Akron, addressing disparities in births, you might also want to have to add some perspective. But let me ask also Beth to contribute to that.
Thank you. I think one of the things we experience in addition to skin color for the people that we settle as refugees is disparities in the medical system around people's ability to access it because of language barriers. And that our medical systems, although they have these things called language lines, so if somebody doesn't speak English, they can have their caregiver call the language line, but you don't pick up on any of the physical cues, any kind of information other than just word for word. And it can be very difficult for people to explain what's happening to them and then to get the proper kind of medical care. And there's also just a kind of a privileging of who gets care and in what way. So I'm noticing that quite a bit as we, and some institutions like Upstate Medical University is here in Syracuse, and they are trying to address this in terms of training their healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, et cetera, with looking at things from a racial equity lens. But it needs to really be built very deeply into our curriculum and into the way people who see people in emergency rooms or people in their private care practices treat people.
Crystal, do you want to add anything to that?
That just, Beth sharing just reminded me of some of the work, some of the additional work that we're doing around the infant mortality disparities, and the need, and we're seeing the need to be able to connect with healthcare providers who, in many cases, it's unconscious bias. It really is. It's just
Right.
you don't realize that you are treating a Black mom who enters with a partner different than you. You're making assumptions that that partner is not that woman's husband without even knowing. And if it's a white couple, then you're assuming, of course, that they're married, or all kinds of assumptions. You're assuming that one person might be in pain, might be able to tolerate pain or discomfort, a Black person, more than a white person. And so all of these things we're talking about, I just see that what we need is a process and a structured way of talking about them. And so what we're working on really hard is putting together the processes to make sure that everyone's in the circle, or everyone is represented in the circle, all the way from the top of the healthcare profession all the way to, you know, the whole continuum, so that, you know, if we really want to make systemic change, everybody needs to be a part of the conversation and everybody needs to be a part of the solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Anyone else want to contribute to that? Thank you, Crystal.
I do want to be mindful. We are losing some folks, Val, because they had other commitments.
So I think we probably could close this webinar, but I do want to emphasize what Bruce mentioned. Let's plan on doing that, and I will be reaching out to all of you, and any of you who are interested in being part of putting together the webinar to talk about issues of health disparities and inequities, especially in connection with coronavirus, but in general. That will be a good conversation, and then Bruce and I and Gwen could, you know, maybe plan some kind of a conference call to plan the webinar. Would that be okay, Bruce, with you? Okay, great. And before we close, I do want to thank, obviously, Gwen, my colleague, and Sandra Rodriguez, who helped us with the webinar. Before I close, I do want to also give Martha, our Executive Director, an opportunity to say a few words. Martha?
Val, I think she had to step away.
Oh, she did. Ah, that's too bad. That's too bad. And so before we close, again, thank you all for joining us. I want to mention that we will be doing a follow-up to this webinar. There's still some other information that we wanted to share with you, but at the same time, we want to also explore that possibility of doing a separate discussion on healthcare access in connection with coronavirus, as Bruce was talking about. So we'll be reaching out to you for that. And I do want to mention that we do have some great resources in our website that I encourage you to go and check out. We have resources on mental health, for example. We have resources, as you know, on early childhood education. So please go to our website. Probably most of you have already done so. And lastly, I want to really ask you to help us. We will be sending you a link to a survey, and we hope that you'll be, you know, spend a few minutes filling it out to tell us what you thought about this webinar. We will wait until we do the second part of the webinar, of course, because there's still more information we want to share with you, but we will send you the link later on, and also information on when we're scheduling the follow-up. So any questions or last comments from anyone?
There are a couple of things in the chat box. We will respond to those through email. Just want to thank you all.
Well, thank you too. I appreciate it and learned a lot.
Wonderful. And again, I'll be sending all of you a Doodle meeting poll to find out when would be a convenient time to have the follow-up webinar, possibly next month, April. And then also Bruce and I and Gwen will engage you around the confab to talk about healthcare and coronavirus. So it's been really a privilege to talk to you, and great to see so many of you friends. And it's great that we have a chance to connect like this. So I want to thank you for participating. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.